And we are live on YouTube. And I'll let everybody in. Good evening, everyone. If you're just joining us, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We're just getting started. It takes a couple of minutes to let everybody in. Welcome this evening. Good evening. If you're just joining, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. On Zoom, it takes a couple of minutes before people get in, so sit tight. We'll be getting started in a couple of minutes. One or two more minutes. Hang on, folks.
Matt, you want to update the chat and settings?
All right, let me get started. We're expecting our state legislators to join us one at a time as they free themselves up from their duties in Annapolis. As everybody knows, the Maryland General Assembly is in session, and legislators are running around doing events like this and working on their own legislation. And so we expect first Delegate Janelle Wilkins to be joining us any minute now. But let me say a few things at the top. First of all, my name is Matt Losack. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. I am pleased that two of my special board members are with us, the treasurer, Josh Fisher, and our esteemed colleague, Brandy Brooks. Also, both of them renter activists, longtime renter activists and community activists. And our staff, David Mullins, who is our outreach director, Emily Towie, our Renters Alliance outreach coordinator, and Tim Huang, an outreach coordinator, and Malek Demir and Pat Beckham, also outreach coordinators with us here tonight. A couple of things. There's a lot going on. There are several bills that are pending in Annapolis that are very important to us. Just so people understand, renter protections some of them can be passed at the local level. Some can only be passed at the state level. Our first guest tonight, who has just joined us, looks like she ran down the hall, is our very good friend and esteemed former board member who was on our board for many, many years and remains a renter champion and a fighter for all kinds of justice in Annapolis, and is now a senior leader also in the Maryland General Assembly. Is our good friend, Delegate Janelle Wilkins, who's been fighting for just cause eviction protection now for several years, and is a very critical and important bill that is gaining momentum each year with the support of a statewide coalition that includes the Renters Alliance. and many other groups, and has gotten unprecedented support. And we hope this year will also be recognized for that support in the committee, now chaired by Chairman Mark Corman, a delegate from Montgomery County, and also includes a member who's on our board, Delegate Vaughn Stewart, among other friends. So with that, let me turn it to our friend and colleague, Delegate Janelle Wilkins. Janelle?
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for including me. Thank you for having me on. It is wonderful to be with my friends at the Renters Alliance and the very important work that the Renters Alliance leads throughout Montgomery County and the impact on the state as well. Hello to everyone who is on the line. Thank you so much for joining us. I am coming to you live from Annapolis, here at our state capitol for our 90-day legislative session. As you know, we are in session where we introduce and consider legislation for 90 days every year from January through April. So we have 90 days to get the job done. And one of the pieces of legislation that I have introduced is details just cause eviction. The bill numbers, so that you have it, is the House bill is HB 477. And I'll put that in the chat as well so you'd have access to it. Just cause eviction looks at non-lease renewals, and it requires a landlord to provide a justifiable reason outlined in the law if they decide not to renew a lease. We know that anytime a lease is not renewed or someone's evicted for any reason, it is extremely debilitating to that family, especially at a time when rent is so high all throughout the state. And to find a home that is suitable, that is safe, that meets all of the family's needs, and also something that that family or that individual can afford is extremely challenging. And so anytime there is someone displaced, we want to ensure that there's a high standard for that, and we want to hold landlords accountable to that. So that bill is actually being heard on Tuesday, February 13th. It's around the corner. And we definitely need your support, especially if you are on the line and you have been impacted by a non-lease renewal where a landlord has told you they're not renewing your lease and it was unfair and it was unjust and it impacted you. Renters' stories about how they're impacted by these bills is the most important thing that we can do. So if you are on this line or on this Zoom and you are a renter who's been impacted by a non-lease renewal that was unfair and you'd like to share that story at the hearing next week, please do reach out. I'll put my email address in the chat because your testimony will really help us to pass this bill. The last thing that I'll mention is that I believe this is our year to pass just cause eviction. We've had a change in leadership in the committees. We have a committee chair and leader that's much more supportive of the issue. We have across the hall in the Senate, we have a Senate sponsor that's a fierce advocate for the bill and a committee that has also been very supportive in terms of individual meetings. And so I believe this is the year for just cause eviction. We are getting closer and closer and closer to passage. So this is the moment to get involved. We do have, I want to mention that this is an enabling bill. So what that means is that it gives the authority to jurisdictions to pass just cause eviction. Right now, if Montgomery County wanted to move forward and say, we want to do just cause eviction, they cannot do that. Our county council does not have the authority. So this bill gives the authority to jurisdictions to do just cause. And we have the support of over 30 county and city officials across the state on this bill, from everywhere from the Eastern Shore to Baltimore City to Montgomery County. And so we are proud to have that support for the bill. So with that, I will stop there and just once again make the request that if you have a story that deals with non-lease renewal, we would really love to have your testimony next week at the hearing to help pass this bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Delegate Wilkins. Just so there's a number of people on this call who are, we're coordinating, who are experiencing, unfortunately, what we believe is abuse and retaliation and have been given notices to vacate, and we will work with them to ensure that their testimony is heard on Tuesday. I think it's worth noting for people who don't understand what the situation is now, it only takes a landlord to give 60 days notice toward the end of a lease in the state of Maryland to announce that they're not going to renew the lease. They do not have to say why. They don't have to provide justification. And unfortunately, it becomes a way to circumvent due process, to retaliate against tenants seeking promised or required services, for organizing a tenants association, for asking the landlord to lower the rent. And unfortunately, we're also seeing a number of instances where landlords are targeting people who are low income, people of color, people who are receiving public assistance, even though that's illegal. But because we don't have just cause eviction protection in place that Janelle Wilkins is championing in the Maryland General Assembly, tenants are vulnerable to this process. The landlord doesn't have to say why they are doing it. This bill, if it enables the local communities, would enable the local communities to pass just cause. And once that's passed, a landlord would have to provide justification as to why they're not renewing a lease. And therefore, eviction would be much more difficult unless it's justified. And so we are seeing tenants who are intimidated, whole communities who are intimidated from speaking up and pursuing required or promised services or their rights. So we really need everyone. If you can't come to Annapolis, if you don't have this experience, you could write a letter, you could call your delegates, you could call everybody in the Maryland General Assembly and urge them to support this very important legislation. Janelle, you have something else?
And I just wanted to add that there's also virtual testimony. We do have the opportunity, if you're not able to come to Annapolis, we know it's difficult to get here, that you can provide testimony virtually on Zoom as well. So that is an option.
And if anybody would like advice on how to do this, it's a little bit complicated. There's a format for writing testimony. One only has 2 minutes at the most to testify. So we can help you develop testimony. Some of the folks we're already working with, we will do that tomorrow. We will help you to upload it into the system. It's easy if you know how to do it. It's impossible if you don't. So we will help guide you to that as well. But again, it is the top priority of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. We've been working on this, gosh, Janelle, for 10 years, 15 years. It was one of the first things we asked for when the Renters Alliance was formed back in 2010. And like, unfortunately, all important justice legislation, the wheels of justice turn very slowly. Anybody who's a student of civil rights knows it didn't happen overnight. And the same thing with housing and renters' rights. It takes time, but we've gotten to a point where it looks like the tumblers may be lining up, and we've got a talented champion leading the way. So do we have any questions for Delegate Wilkins? I know that she has some time for us, but then she has to dart off to the next thing. Staff, do we see anything in the chat for her?
Yeah, there was a question in the chat. Would this affect landlords of 1 or 2 properties, or would they be exempt?
That's a great question. So since it's an authorizing bill, we are allowing the jurisdictions to determine if there are any exceptions. There has been conversation in Annapolis around some members or just interest in exempting owner occupied or landlords that own very few properties. But this bill, as it currently is constituted, it provides that flexibility to the jurisdictions if they wanted to change that. However, right now it applies to everyone.
Great, thank you.
And I think, obviously the Renters Alliance would take the position that everybody should be protected by just cause. But to underscore, we just want to get the local enabling. That's what this bill will do. It'll give permission by the state for the local jurisdictions to pass it if they so choose, and in any form they so choose. So, some jurisdictions may not pass it. St. Mary's might not pass it. Anne Arundel may not pass it. We believe Montgomery County has been strongly in support of this, as has the majority of the Montgomery County delegation. The Montgomery Council has been very supportive, and of course, County Executive Mark Elridge has been very determined to see this passed. I think that we've also seen traction in Prince George's County and Baltimore, where we also have large populations of renters. Again, I think this has broad support. It takes a while for people to get used to it, but we're seeing more and more of the legislature understand it. And at the end of the day, what we're saying is no one should be evicted from their home without a good reason. Also, some bad news on that. As a reminder to everybody, Maryland is the #1 eviction filing state in the nation. And we have to deal with this. Maryland is no longer a rural state with people living in house and garden. It is becoming increasingly a state with small cities with a large number of renters, nearly 40% of the state. And that's a lot of people living in rental housing that is currently unstable based on the whim and fancy of a landlord's desire to boot somebody out with 60 days notice. This has to change. Any other questions for Delegate Janelle Wilkins?
Yeah, so Amanda asks, are there specific opposition figures who might be assuaged that we should target with email?
That's a great question. The main opposition is actually the landlords and landlord lobby, and I wouldn't have us use our time trying to convince the big landlord lobby. However, emailing the committee and the legislators that represent you is extremely effective. We want all legislators in Montgomery County or wherever you live to know that they represent you and that you support just cause eviction. So even just sending an email to the people that represent you at the state level and sharing that support would make a big difference for this bill. If you don't know who represents you, you can go to mdelect.net. I'll put that in the chat, or if someone could put that in the chat as well, mdelect.net. And it'll tell you who your state house members and state senators are. And it could be a 2-sentence email. I am your constituent and I support just cause eviction. Please work to support this bill. It could literally be 2 or 3 sentences. So that's a great question. And I will also put the link to where you can watch the hearing if you'd like to watch it, because I saw a question on that as well.
And we will put out that information in our newsletter Monday morning as well. I did just put in the chat for those of you who have access to the banner in Baltimore, Delegate Wilkins' op-ed on just cause and urging its passage so that folks can stay informed. Any other questions for Delegate Wilkins? All right, well, seeing none, Janelle, you've got a lot of work ahead of you. We are counting on you. And we will see you. We're bringing a boatload of folks on Tuesday to join the boatload coming from Baltimore and Prince George's and every other which place across the state to support this legislation. And I believe, again, I think Mark Elrich will also be speaking to it. At least I spoke to them today. They are working on it. We know he supports it, of course. So one way or the other, his testimony will get in. And we'll see about everybody else. But there is an avalanche of support. And I certainly hope that your colleagues in the Maryland General Assembly recognize that. It is the fairest, most appropriate legislation I think we have in the renters' rights portfolio, and we sure need it to pass. So with that, I thank you for joining us. My friend, we'll see you downtown Silver Spring when you finally surface from all those duties out there in Annapolis.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for your support of this important bill.
Thank you. We are expecting Delegate Lorig Charkoudian, but absent that, I think we can jump right over to Delegate Bernice Marikou North, my friend and former colleague from the Silver Spring Citizens Advisory Board. And I believe one of my staff is going to introduce you.
Yeah, hi Delegate. Thanks for joining us tonight. We wanted to talk about your bill, House Bill 093, which would limit a tenant's liability to 2 months of rent after they vacate if they get a doctor's note that they have a mental illness. Is that correct?
That's the simplest way of putting it, yes.
Okay. Yeah, could you just talk to us about the bill?
Sure, and just want to say thank you to Renters Alliance, and a special shout out to Matt Lozak, and I see a familiar face, Brandy Brooks and Josh. Thank you all for for continuing the good work for renters across not just Montgomery County, but really the state of Maryland, because since this is YouTube Live, really, you know, across the nation, so we can be a model of advocacy for tenants. So yeah, HB 93 is dealing with the problem I was seeing, particularly during the pandemic, with those with mental health conditions who are renters. And I'm talking about the ones that might have like bipolar disorder and something has worsened, you know, after a period of time. And there's a desire that one person might have to leave that apartment to get better care. When I was looking at the statutes, I said, well, there's nothing that says you can be released for mental health reasons, it only says physical. And I just started kind of thinking about all the stories I've heard throughout the pandemic, not just with those mental health disorders, but perhaps a college student that's dealing with a severe mental breakdown, and they have to now vacate their lease and return home to their home state. The financial consequences is completely unnecessary when the cause of the problem is one's mental health and the deterioration of that. So that led me to be the primary sponsor on the House side of this bill. And what you said, Emily, is essentially what the bill does. And it originally listed a number of healthcare professionals that could write the doctor's note to excuse someone from their lease due to mental health conditions. What we have found since the hearing last week is that we had a lot of conversations with counselors and therapists, and I gained a better understanding of the expertise that is really needed and preferred among the counselors, therapists, and actually the landlords to have someone vacate their lease. And so we're actually in the process of amending it to just focus on physicians and psychiatrists. Psychiatrists are defined as physicians, and the reason why we're narrowing to that is that they have the highest degree of expertise, and this is the one area where many of the stakeholders are pretty much in agreement that they prefer that person being the one to write the doctor's note. And this bill is just going to actually add on an explanation as to why someone's breaking their lease due to, you know, worsening of their mental health condition. And so I'm very confident. Well, I'm hopeful. I want to say confident. I'm very hopeful that it will will be successful in this bill. The Senate sponsor is Senator Jeff Wallstreicher, and him and I talk regularly about the bill on both sides to make sure it's going in the way we would like it to go. So I'm hopeful that we'll have success this year on the bill. Like I said, the bill hearing was last week for both the Senate and the House side. We had folks from legal aid and other stakeholders just give their testimonies as to like real live examples of renters that try to break their lease because of their mental health conditions, and they found that they had to pay the amount of rent that was still outstanding. And so with this bill, it's just making sure that we're equating mental health with physical health. But look, the exceptions to breaking the lease start off with the military, right? And it expanded 20 years ago to deal with those with physical health issues. We're overdue for this to extend to mental health as well. And I just thought now is the time, now better than later, to address the issue. So that's the crux of the bill. And like I said, we had the hearing last week. It's supposed to go through subcommittee at some point, then we vote on the floor. And I'm glad we were able to pre-file it so we can get some early traction on the bill. And it worked out well because it allowed us time to kind of flesh out all the details with all the stakeholders and making sure that we're all on the same page with this bill. So that's the crux of the bill.
Did you get any opposition?
No, the only, we just got letters of concern. So that's a great question. And the letters of concern were from the counselor and therapist. So it just required us to have a conversation to flesh out the details. And once we did, you know, I'm pretty confident that we are going to move forward with the bill. We had some initial conversations on the language to excuse someone from the lease. And so once we kind of sorted all that out, you know, we made that an amendment to the bill. So there'll be some amendments to it, but it's not going to take away from the point is that when someone has a mental health condition that deteriorates or worsens, they should not be held financially liable when those with physical health issues don't have that same level of liability. So it's really just a matter of health parity.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe one of the things that we put into Bill 1915 back in 2015 was to strengthen the reasons why someone could break a lease early for issues, quote, beyond their control.
Mm.
And that included financial issues, loss of a spouse, loss of a job, something beyond your control. Not quitting because you want a better job in California, but actually, if you were let go through no fault of your own, or say the breadwinner is lost, or you become incapable of working, or physically and I guess mentally disabled and unable to bring in an income or stay in your home, that these would all be justifiable reasons to break a lease early. Does this bill relate to Montgomery County, or is this designed to strengthen the state law?
Good question. It's designed to strengthen the state law. So it's going to strengthen the existing law, Property Code 8-212.2, when we're dealing with the exception to the requirement to pay rent. This would just strengthen it to include mental health as well as physical health to this bill. So yeah, but that's a great question. Thank you for that.
And sorry, I know because you're a lawyer, I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit, and you can hopefully speak in layman's terms for the rest of us.
Sure.
But the bill that back to 1915 did have a sort of a 30-day requirement. Does this language indicate the kind of notice a tenant would have to give in order to break a lease early under these circumstances? Is it immediate, or is there a period of time?
Well, it doesn't change what's already existing law in terms of the tenant's responsibilities to try to vacate the lease. So the reason why it's 2 months liability rent is that you would need to give about 60 days notice anyway, which is why the 2 months kicks in for those with mental health. I'm sorry, with mental health as well as physical health. Currently, mental health is what we're desiring. So it doesn't change any of the tenant's responsibilities to give the appropriate notice under state law.
Does it allow for a third party to give notice?
A third party to give notice? That's a good question. Were you talking about someone outside of the tenant?
Yeah, if the tenant is incapacitated and taken to a hospital or whatever, not able to give notice, can someone who's not on the lease do that? Would it be a doctor or a relative?
It's an excellent question. I also do guardianship cases. I'm kind of putting my lawyer hat on as well. If there is a legal guardian that takes substitute judgment of the tenant, because you're saying assuming the tenant's incapacitated, then that shouldn't be an issue, because as long as your legal document saying third party has the legal ability to make decisions on behalf of the person incapacitated, that should not be an issue. I think without the legal document, though, this bill or the law currently wouldn't, as far as I understand, wouldn't allow that. But that's my legal assessment.
Friendly amendment. It should be noticed from anybody. If in fact obviously, if the landlord says, "Oh, baloney, prove it," they're going to have to prove it. But we know of a lot of circumstances with seniors, for example, who do not have relatives or don't have children, or people who are living alone for whatever reason, who become incapacitated, and a neighbor, a friend, or somebody tells the property manager, and if legally that's not sufficient notice, that tenant could still be vulnerable. I'm wondering if that could be something of consideration.
Well, I appreciate that. We'll definitely take a look at, like I said, still in the early stages of the bill. It hasn't even gone to subcommittee yet for consideration and vote. So I appreciate that heads up, because we're literally going through working through amendments now. So thanks for that heads up.
I'm going to turn to my fellow board member, Brandy Brooks, because she's paying attention to the chat. Brandy, do we have any questions in the chat?
We've got a number of questions. This is definitely something that's engaging folks. Pat, do you want to go ahead and read?
Well, I just want clarification. Psychiatrists as well as other physicians can weigh in on this situation. Could they get notes from their, for instance, primary physician and take it to the landlord or does it specifically have to be from a psychiatrist?
No, it can be from a physician as well. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So that was Amanda's question as well. So thanks for that. There's another set of questions from Melinda, just to check and see, are there any provisions that that would prevent this bill from being applicable to a tenant. For instance, if the tenant was diagnosed with the condition prior to signing the lease, or if the tenant was not diagnosed until after, is there anything like that that might make it so a tenant was ineligible to take advantage of this protection?
Great question. It doesn't make it ineligible. What really this bill is tackling is, like, let's say hypothetically, you enter this lease, you already have, bipolar disorder or whatever. And then there is something that has worsened that condition, where sustaining your ability to manage the condition is not feasible or unsustainable. That's what this bill is targeting. So actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it led to, before we even got to the hearing, we had conversations about how, people who have like pre-existing mental health conditions, would that be, this bill have the unintended consequences of keeping those folks unable to rent, right? Because you don't want landlords discriminating against you because you have a mental health condition, which is why we kind of narrowed the focus to say, well, if the condition is worsening, as opposed to just blatantly saying if one has a disorder. All right, because that way we're not going to try to touch that potential unintended consequences of discrimination. So I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And then there was one more question that I thought was a great one from Karen, about the level of information that a tenant's required to provide about their protected health information. Does this legislation require that someone divulge a whole bunch of details about their medical conditions, or can the language be fairly simple from their physician or psychiatrist, just indicating, hey, I've evaluated this person and they need this based on mental health needs?
Yeah, excellent questions. And I'm just, Renters Alliance is always kicking butt with these questions. I love it. Just like reputation is great. So we actually worked very hard on trying to find like general language. We didn't want to deal with violating anyone's HIPAA rights. So the language that we are, and granted, this is not going to be set in stone, because this is something we are proposing to the subcommittee. And once the subcommittee has it in their hands, they'll accept it or not accept it. But what I'm aiming for is just generally have a standard language to say, if you have a medical condition that is a mental disorder, it doesn't have to go into like the extent of the mental disorder or anything like that. Just a mental disorder that's defined by statute, Maryland statute, that causes the continued habitation of the leased premises to be unfeasible or unsustainable, or requires the patient to move to a home or facility with a better standard of care. So it's somewhat similar to the language of the physical exception, but we're just adding the fact that this is also for those who have mental disorders. You don't have to go into the language. And honestly, you give as much to your PCP or your psychiatrist as you want to give. And that's one thing I learned from talking with a lot of the mental health professionals, that we only write stuff if the patient wants us to write it. And so we have in the language of this bill, just standard language that the medical professional can use to write the note. But if you want to write more, that's up to you. But there's some standard language just to let the landlord be on notice that this is the reason.
Great.
Now, I imagine a landlord would be able to say, I disagree. I mean, ultimately, this could end up in court. And then the certifying physician would have to be able to testify to some extent that they have made an evaluation and that they certify that the person is incapacitated and unable to continue the tenancy. So, I mean, ultimately, that's how it would work, right?
That is the worst case scenario, but that's the beauty of trying to work with the multi-housing association, the other landlords, to say, well, what's currently going on? Because there are some there's some landlords that do release their tenants for limited liability. That's their choice. But there's some landlords that don't. And so this bill is just trying to standardize this practice across the state. And one of the things that was mentioned in our hearing last week, and I'm happy to give you a link if you want to like geek out and listen to it, was the fact that, if there is a law created saying that we have to do this type of limited liability, they'll make it work in their contract. They'll have like an emergency termination of lease clause that everyone's understanding of. They sign off on it, and then only when some reason that particular agreement is violated, then yes, court is the the last resort, really. But the landlords will be trying to work with the new state law, assuming that it gets through, and they'll modify their lease accordingly. And that's something that came out in the testimony last week, which I was happy to hear.
Well, as you know, the Renters Alliance, it does not rely on the kindness of strangers. We usually prefer that it be protected in the law. So we appreciate what you're doing. I know Karen raised the question about what do we do about bullying landlords? Well, Renters Alliance deals with bullying landlords and property managers all the time. I'm not sure that this bill directly relates to that, but we can say that the Just Cause Eviction bill does. And we want to make sure that that gets passed. So Karen, stay tuned. Any other questions for Delegate Bernice Miracle North? And by the way, how is Mr. North?
He's doing well. Thanks for asking. This is how far Matt and I go back. So thank you so
Tell him I
much.
said hey.
Out of the political limelight, as you can
Tell him I said hey, and we're
I
always
will.
available for cocktails.
Great.
Yes. Any other questions for Delegate
Oh, what is
Miracle
the
North?
title of the bill? You know what? I have so many bills in my head. Let me make sure I get the exact language right. So it's called it's House Bill 93. That's my house number, and it's landlord tenant termination of residential lease limitation of liability of rent.
If you're on this call, you will
That's
be
it.
put into our database. If you're not in the database already, you should have received our newsletter yesterday. And we will do another one on Monday, but that lists all of these bills. You can click into them, see who's sponsoring them. Obviously, the delegate lead sponsor is is with us now, but you can see where it is, what the chronology is going to be, and when it's what committee it's in. And with all of these bills, which we support, we urge everyone listening to contact your legislators, contact all legislators, contact the committee, and urge their support and passage, or as they say, a favorable report. So again, thank you. Any other questions for Delegate Miracle North?
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. And you have a lot of great bills coming up that you're going to hear about. And I see Delegate Chakoudian on, so I'm looking forward to hearing her summary as well.
All right. Well, terrific. Thank you for joining us.
All
And we
right.
wish you the best as always.
Thank you so much.
Delegate Chakoudian, are you with us? I see your name, but I don't see your face yet. I'm going to count
Hi
to
there.
three.
Yes.
Oh, there she.
Hey, I can talk, and in like 30 seconds, I can
All right, very good.
turn
Then
my camera
I'll do
on.
my
So,
dance. I'll do my dance.
okay. All right. Okay.
Just
Sorry about that.
there was a question in the chat about the rent stabilization regulations. First of all, let me just say that we will focus on county stuff next town hall, which will be on the 21st of February. The regulations have been published. Please, staff, put the link in the chat if you can. It's on the regulations have been published in the Montgomery County Register. Our staff and other allies of ours are poring over these regulations right now. We are deeply concerned about their impact and what they will mean in terms of this legislation, which, again, the Renters Alliance position on the legislation was that it's a positive step forward. Given the history of promoting rent stabilization in Montgomery County, it was revolutionary, but it is in no way mission accomplished. It is a 6% rent increase cap, which is very high. That is not what we wanted. We wanted something substantially lower, but we're also seeing increases of 7, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20, 50% and higher. And so for those tenants, it will provide some protection. It will not protect people who are living in apartment buildings that have been built in the last 23 years. So every apartment building has 23 years protection. If it was built 22 years ago, they got 1 year. If it was built last year, they've got 22 years. That's a lot of people who are not protected by this legislation. Likewise, small landlords who have 1 or 2 units were also exempted, which makes no sense at all to us either. Both of those provisions, by the way, were promoted by as amendments by Councilwoman Dawn Ludke. And so we hope to persuade her to perhaps back off those provisions in the future. But right now, thousands and thousands of renters who live in small units are not protected. And it's our belief from the Renters Alliance that if you're a landlord, small or large, you have the same responsibilities to stable, affordable, quality housing. So, pay attention to these regulations. They are very important. Read them. They're 22 pages worth. We will read them. We're meeting with the Director of Housing next week to go over our questions and concerns, and we'll continue to look into these issues. And if you have any questions or concerns yourself and you want us to bring them forward to the Department of Housing, we're happy to do so. People can contact us at info@rentersalliance.org. With that, I believe one of my staff is going to introduce Delegate Lorig Cherkoudian.
Hi, yes. So our next speaker is Delegate Lorig Cherkoudian, who has been serving in the House of Delegates since 2019. She represents District 20, which is the Silver Spring, Tacoma, and White Oak area. And she is not only a champion of environmental justice, but also of housing and of renters. So she has two bills that we're going to talk about today. House Bill 044, which would change the definition of gross income to help renters get relief from property tax. And also House Bill 139, which would require landlords to accept financial assistance from the Office of Home Energy Programs and the Department of Human Services to help tenants pay for utility services. Let me know if I missed anything. Delegate Cherkoudian, and we'll hand it over for you from there.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on here. Thanks to everyone for all the work you do all the time to make sure that Montgomery County is a safe and welcoming and inclusive place for renters, an affordable place for renters. And I'm thrilled to join you. It is legislative session, as you heard from my colleagues, and things are hectic. And I just left one event and I'm going to another, and I pulled over on the side of the road so I could be part of this. I am safe. I am not driving. But I didn't really, excuse me, I did not want to miss this opportunity. So I will tell you about two bills, a third bill that's actually related to one of them. So I'm just going to create a little bit of context, as I hope everybody on this call knows. I'm going to start with House Bill 139, which is the one that's related to the Office of Home Energy Programs. I hope that everybody on this Zoom knows that if you are a renter and your utilities are included in your rent, you can get utility assistance because you're still paying your utilities and you could still be energy burdened, even if the utilities are paid in that rent, because when the utilities go up, the landlord passes that on to the renters. And so it's really important, first of all, that everyone knows that. If folks don't know that or don't know how to access that, be sure to reach out to my office or to Matt or other advocates on the call. And tell your friends. That's a relatively new thing I had been working on for a while. What we found out, though, was that in order to be able to access the utility assistance, tenants need to be able to get access to the information about utility usage in their building. So landlords need to provide the information, essentially cooperate with the tenant to be able to fill out the form so the tenant can become eligible for the home energy programs. And so what we started to hear was, while many landlords cooperate and in fact do outreach and tell people about the program, there are some who don't cooperate, who don't provide the information. And then there's some tenants who actually are afraid to ask. They're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid to bring themselves out as potentially that a landlord might become aware of their financial situation in a way that the landlord wasn't before. So what we did is we created this bill. The bill as it's drafted right now is actually going to look very different, but it's going to get at the same issue. We've been working with the Office of Home Energy Programs and others on amendments. But we wrote this bill so basically all tenants have essentially a legal right to the information about their landlord's utility bills. And so the landlords are required to provide that information. So that the idea is that they're required to provide it even without the request. And so the idea is that everyone would just have access to that. So that's going to be very important to support tenants to be able to get access to the home energy programs. Now, it's still going to be really important that we all continue to do outreach so everyone knows that this is available, but it'll take at least this barrier away. So that's the first bill. That's, and I don't know, are you taking questions? I can't quite see the chat. Will you tell me if there's a,
We will. We're monitoring
question?
for you.
Okay,
Go ahead,
that's great.
Laura.
So the next one is House Bill 44 and House Bill 287, and they're related. So I'm just going to talk about them together. So I think hopefully folks know about the renters property tax credit. And again, this is one of those things that was originally developed for homeowners. The idea was a homeowner's property tax credit in those communities where property taxes are growing really quickly and we're trying to support people to stay in their homes. People might be on a fixed income or just, have very low income. And then as property taxes are going up, it's harder for people to stay in their homes. One of the points that several advocates have made a couple of years back was that, well, renters are also paying their property taxes. They're just paying it through their rent. And so to the extent we want to keep renters in their homes as well, there ought to be a parallel property tax credit that renters with, the similar situation and similar caps in terms of the value and so on and so forth, renters ought to have this as well, because when property values are increasing quickly, rents are going to increase quickly, and that gets passed on to the renters. And so, again, thinking about places like the Purple Line, where you have people who have lived in their homes, homeowners or renters for decades, and suddenly the property values go up and there's this people are in danger of losing their homes. So that has been in place for a while, but there's two issues that we are trying to address this legislative session. One of the issues was there was actually a difference in the rules for renters and homeowners. So homeowners had a situation where, when you look at what income is counted against them in determining whether they're eligible, their retirement was not counted against them. Whereas for renters, the retirement was counted against them. And so just from a solely equity perspective, that's unacceptable. And so we wanted to line up and have the sets of rules for renters and for homeowners be the same. So that bill is House Bill 287. That basically lines them up. So it makes it so that any retirement income isn't counted against a renter in determining their eligibility for the tax credit. The second one really is designed, this is House Bill 44, is designed to basically update the tax credits for 2024. Basically, it increases the income eligibility from $60,000 a year to $70,000 a year. It increases the home, the value cap from a value of $300,000 to $450,000 because property values have gone up so much, and it removes the counting against. They removes the right now, if people get like SNAP benefits or other safety net services, those public funds count against people in terms of their income qualification. And so this bill removes counting SNAP and so on against people's income in terms of eligibility. So basically what this bill does, as far as I'm concerned, and the way I've been describing it, is it kind of catches up this whole program to inflation and to the increases we've seen in property values since 2010, which was the last time that these numbers were put into law. So that's the third bill. The second and third bill are pretty closely aligned. They just ended up, for technical reasons, being two separate bills. So those are them, and I'll take questions.
Just a quick story here that we have seen when I first came to Montgomery County more than a couple decades ago and started to be active as a renter. We were told as renters that we shouldn't be taken seriously because renters don't pay taxes. And I had to say, where do you think the landlord pays property taxes from? Do you think he takes our rent and then pays out of his own pocket for the property tax? No, rent includes tax for that property. And thanks to Delegate Charkoudian, there's a recognition that tenants are part of that tax base and receiving some greater relief for that is extremely important. I'll also say a story that the idea that utilities used to be included in rent nowadays are not. More and more tenants are paying directly their own utilities. It's no longer included in the rent, and understanding how those bills are calculated, and in some cases, receiving relief for mounting utility bills is also extremely important. So staff, what do we have for Delegate Laura Charkoudian?
Yeah, we have a question from Evelyn, who asks, is renters credit only for people with dependents under 18, or is it all renters regardless of having dependents?
The tax credit? Is that
Yeah.
the renter's tax credit? Yeah. It is, it's not restricted to people who have dependents under 18. It's dependent, it's related to if someone has an income of, right now it's set at 60,000 or below. And there's a few other qualifications that I don't have in front of me right now, but that's the basis of it. And then, as I said, the things I'm trying to change about it is to make sure that retirement and public assistance isn't counted against that income. Because right now, if you have 60,000, but you get SNAP benefits, you might not qualify. So again, if we pass this bill, then the SNAP benefits wouldn't count against it. So if you're getting 60,000 a year in income, you would qualify for that.
Is the 60,000 across the board, or is it part of a menu like, if you have 5 kids or 2 kids, or you have 3 dependents?
Yeah, it's odd. It's not. No, it's a flat amount. There's a lot, I think, that needs to be worked. I started working on this, and I'm like, why do we have that? And how come that's set up that way? That's a little bit different than you would normally see these things set up. But, so I took on a few things this year, but it's not sort of the way that like a tax structure or something else, like an income tax structure would be set up. There is a bigger issue. We probably don't want to get into it now, of like how property taxes and that system is like totally divorced from income taxes and the comptroller system. And so you try to align these things and they become very difficult to align because the systems are totally different. And that's just one example of where you see different definitions of income actually in each one. So.
Well, again, as we pestered Delegate Bernice Miracle North with our suggestions, another friendly amendment might be also to consider the different family situations. 60,000 for an individual is very different from 60,000
for sure.
for the family of 3 children or
Yep.
more.
Yep.
Something to consider in terms of who it should benefit and under what circumstances. Lots to discuss in that, but I don't know what's possible. I guess the idea is to get across the finish line first, and then we pass it and then amend it. Any other questions for Delegate Charkoudian?
Yeah, we have one question from Linda. Are there any bills available for seniors on fixed income and do not meet the income requirements for utility expense assistance?
I mean, sorry, is the question about, is there like energy assistance if people don't meet the energy assistance guidelines, or just general assistance? Is that how you read that?
I'm not sure, Melinda, if you're there.
Yeah. Well, I would say this. I think that
she says gas.
I think that there's a lot of different programs for people with different levels of income, sort of very low income and then moderate and so on. The Office of Home Energy Programs, OHEP, which manages, they have the MEAP, which is the Maryland Energy Assistance Program. They have EUSP, which is Electric Utility Assistance Program. All of those have certain guidelines, and those are household size based, sort of what you were describing a minute ago, Matt. Depending on household size and income. Those are the only ones that I know of for energy assistance, gas or electric. I'm not aware of any other than that. That's like a state program. If the county has something, I'm not sure.
All right. Anything else for Delegate Charkoudian?
I see another.
Amanda's
Yeah.
asking for a more efficiency in the application process.
For
Geez, the
for sure.
rationality is so refreshing.
Well, I'll tell you what, yes. And so there's a couple different answers to that. So it is supposed to be one application for MEP and EUSP right now. To get access to arrearage assistance, I think there's a little bit of a different application. But the bill that I passed last year, which is going to take a little bit of time to come online, but it's actually what it's going to do is if somebody gets, for example, SNAP, then you would automatically be enrolled in energy assistance. And also if someone gets SNAP, they would automatically be enrolled in Medicaid. But categorical eligibility, this idea that you get one program because the other programs have similar criteria, instead of having to apply to multiple different programs, you get through one door and you get all of the programs that have similar criteria. So I passed that bill last year. It's taking a while because it's computer systems that have to get updated, but sometime in the next in the next year or so, that should be online. So absolutely right. Like, it seems so obvious. It saves money and time for individuals applying, but also for the state in administering it. So definitely, and we're headed in that direction.
Anything else for Delegate Charkoudian before she gets a ticket?
Thanks so much for letting me join, and in this sort of awkward, shaded kind of a way on the side of the street, but all good. I didn't want to miss it.
No, well, we're glad you came, and we also are very appreciative of your efforts and how much thought you give to this legislation. It's such a relief to work with legislators who are acting in good faith, who are acting thoughtfully, and acting to pursue good public policy. I had 40 years as press and communications, so I'm addicted to watching the news all day. And when you have to watch the United States Congress these days, it's enough to want to break your lease, according to Delegate Bernice Miracle-North's bill. But this is good therapy for me, and hopefully for everybody else to listen to this good work. So with that, Delegate Charkoudian, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Delegate Vaughn Stewart is unfortunately not able to join us. He is stuck in a meeting in Annapolis, as we expect all of our legislators to do. But I'm hoping, David, would you be able to take a look at these bills and give us a quick summary?
For Delegate Stewart's bills?
Correct.
Sure. I think what he was going to mention tonight is, and I'll put the links in as soon as I'm done going through here. I think the main one he was going to talk about was House Bill 428, which directs rental assistance to community schools. And anyone who knows more about the community schools program wants to chime in, feel free. But my understanding is these are some of our public schools in Maryland that receive a specific concentration of poverty grant, and then they offer extended services, more wraparound services. And those schools then, I think, again, I'll double check, I believe the figure was 10 million. If it would be directed then through
it's a $10 million fund, and there are about 350 plus community schools across Maryland.
Thank you. And then, yes, but specifically for rental assistance, then to be directed to the families at those schools as needed. And so, yeah, if you take a look, I'll put the link. Oh, the link's there. Yeah. So if you look at the bill, you'll notice it just adds on to an existing statute about community schools and allows that to happen. I don't know anything about opposition or otherwise. But, I've definitely seen some advocacy for it from some of our renter group advocacy partners around this. And I don't know if he was going to talk about the Tenant Safety Act.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And then
you know about the Tenant Safety Act. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's been this was one that he introduced last year that now it's still called the Tenant Safety Act. I had the bill number in front of me here. Let me see if
I got it.
Okay. But yeah, it's 1117, I guess, is what it is.
There you go.
And yeah, so the Tenant Safety Act is about something that was requested actually at a recent community meeting at a property that Tim and I were at They were having a lot of trouble getting maintenance done, and then called code, and then there's health and safety issues that are just not being addressed fast enough, and they want to know about withholding rent. They feel like it's time to talk about things like rent escrow. But this was an entire community, I mean, where a significant part of them were having the same issues and wanted to do this collectively. And so the Tenant Safety Act kind of would be for those situations. It would give tenants an opportunity to come to court about these kind of issues in a collective manner, literally filing together in court, which right now the only way to do it is to kind of try to coordinate your own individual actions. But what we find is that in some of the more egregious situations of neglect and things like that, it makes a lot more sense, and the tenants, are far more comfortable and ready to move forward with this kind of action if they can do it together. And so I think that's what Delegate Stewart is trying to address with that bill.
And let's just to emphasize something. Right now, if you have a complaint in your building about a leaky pipe or something like that, and it's actually a complaint that is building-wide or community-wide, right now in court, and for that matter in landlord-tenant, they will only address it one complaint at a time, which means that everybody in the building, 50 people might be impacted by this, but 50 people have to file complaints in court. What this bill aims to do is to treat tenants in a building who have a tenants association, giving them legal standing the way a union has legal standing. So you have a union, the union representative can come in and say the entire union needs this fixed. And that would be a great improvement, and obviously increase the power of tenants and level the playing field a little bit in some of these issues having to do with maintenance or quality of life in the building. Again, Vaughn Stewart is on our board and a champion for renters, a renter himself for many years, and we really appreciate his work on this. We don't know when that bill is going to drop, but we expect that it will come forward, and we're not exactly sure when the community schools bill is going to drop, or testimony. Maybe we do, I'm not sure yet, but we'll put that out in our Monday newsletter, but it's not next week. The only thing that we're focusing on for next week is just cause enabling legislation for local municipalities, a top priority for us. And again, there'll be more information about that for everybody who's interested in supporting it. Let me also go into another piece of legislation, which the Renters Alliance has had direct involvement in getting to happen. We have urged the Moore-Miller administration and the Secretary of Housing in the Moore-Miller administration, Secretary Jake Day, to produce a position in that department that focuses on renters' rights. Hard to believe, but most departments of housing have been dealing with building of new housing and home ownership for decades. But as more and more people are moving into rental housing, not just as a station on the way to owning, but as a way of life permanently. And again, as I've said before, nearly 40% of Maryland now lives in rental housing and are not likely to buy a home, but live in their rental housing permanently. It's time for our State Department of Housing to also focus on public policy that protects the quality of life, the stability, and other issues with those tenancies. And so they are promoting a position in the Department of Housing that will answer to the Secretary, that will provide outreach to the local municipalities on renter issues. They're also talking about having funds available for outreach to help tenants understand their rights and responsibilities. And let me see what else we have here on that bill, which I think is worth discussing. It's HB 693. It'll increase the filing fee in the state of Maryland from $8 to $93, with a prohibition that increase in the filing fee be passed on to the tenants. Very important, because right now, as I mentioned before, Maryland is the #1 eviction filing state in the country, with one of the lowest eviction filing fees in the country, which is allowing many unscrupulous landlords to be, quote, serial filers, as the previous Attorney General, Brian Frosch, used to call it. And they are using the courts as a kind of a collection agency, sending tenants, many of them low-income tenants, to have to take a day off from work to go in and defend themselves against constant filings against them that ultimately don't amount to anything because they are able to pay their rent. They just are either late or something. And so increasing the filing fee to a much higher level will hopefully give some landlords a little pause before they file, so that they only file when it's absolutely necessary. The other is it says altering the priority and criteria in the statewide rental assistance voucher program, which will be helpful to many tenants, and also providing vouchers and housing assistance payments to families, and limiting the maximum security deposit required by a residential lease to 1 month's rent instead of 2. And there are some other provisions in that bill, but suffice it to say, it may not be everything that we want, but the fact that the Moore Miller administration and the new Secretary of Housing, Jake Day, are focusing on ways to support and protect renters is good news. But we are also hoping that we'll see them support just cause eviction protections as well, and other renter protections. But all of it together, very important and a positive step for renters in Maryland, although we quickly say there's a lot more to do. What do we have in terms of questions and concerns in the chat, folks?
I'm looking to see if there's anything about that bill specifically, but or Vaughn's bills, but I don't see anything about those.
Question comes in from Melinda. Let me answer that quickly. Unfortunately, there was a amendment to the rent stabilization bill, which was quite a battle, by the way, by Councilwoman Dawn Lutke, that would exempt all buildings for 23 years from the time that they were built. So if a building was built 22 years ago, it has 1 more year of exemption, after which, when this legislation takes effect, which it still has not yet, just so people know. If it's built this year, they'll have 23 years of exemption. Now, we understand the motive behind that, which we support. No one's going to invest $100, $200 million in building a new building if they're not sure that they're going to make their money back and make a profit. We understand that. The rent stabilization was never intended to be an obstacle to building more housing or keeping landlords from making a reasonable profit. But we think 23 years is arbitrary. We think that it should have been something based a little bit more on realistic finances. When a landlord, we thought maybe 10 years was probably closer based on what we know about in this market, in Montgomery County in particular, that a landlord is likely to fill their apartment building quickly and probably going to make back their initial investment in something closer to 10 years. But we would be flexible on that. We would say, look, if you didn't make it back in 10 years, then demonstrate that you didn't make it back, and then there'll be an opportunity to extend that time. But 23 years seemed like a long time to us. So we're not happy with that, but that exists in this bill. Let me remind people about the timeline of this bill. It was signed into law on July 24th. All legislation in Montgomery County has a 90-day period before it takes effect. This particular legislation also required that regulations be developed. That took 3 more months. The regulations draft have been developed and published in the county register. Now there's 30 days for public comment, after which time the final regulations will be presented to the county council, which still must approve those regulations before this legislation takes effect. So we are waiting. We are hoping this will happen in March, but these are the steps that have to happen before this legislation takes effect. Okay, other questions?
Well, there was someone asking for clarification that so if a building is less than 23 years old, then the cap from this bill is just not going to apply, and that's what Matt's saying, that this is, until it's been on the market for 23 years, it's not stabilized. They can raise the rent. And then there was an earlier question, I think when we were talking about just cause, where someone asked if their lease has just been ended, but I don't think they got a notice to vacate. I think they were asking what happens when a lease term just ends. They asked if they go month to month, and I just wanted to confirm for them that yes, that is what happens. I think they also asked if you still need to give notice, and there's still notice requirements if you're going to leave the tenant. They might be 30 instead of 60 at that point. I don't know off the top
That's
of my
right.
head. Okay. And then speaking of exemptions, we always like to remind people, because we do run into confusion, that once it takes effect, this law still will not be effective in the city limits of Gaithersburg, Rockville, and then Tacoma Park's own law is from before governs there.
Okay, this will be a good quiz for my staff. Emily and Tim, why don't you tell us what available resources there are for tenants in Montgomery County now that we've moved on from that?
For tenants who are facing eviction, is that what you're talking about?
We're talking about all of that.
Yeah, for tenants who are facing eviction, they can contact the Department of Health and Human Services. They have a section called Services to End and Prevent Homelessness, and they provide emergency assistance to people who have a court summons for failure to pay rent and are facing immediate eviction. There's currently still COVID rent relief money available. It's running out, but there is still money available for people who were impacted by COVID that caused them to fall behind on their rent directly or indirectly. And again, the requirement is a court summons for failure to pay rent or a red and white eviction notice from the sheriff. So if anyone is in that situation with a court summons and they need help with assistance, you can contact us and we'll put you in touch with someone over at Services to End and Prevent Homelessness, where they can evaluate your eligibility for assistance.
Tim, tell the folks about how to contact the county if they have a code complaint or a violation of their rights in the lease for an OLTA complaint.
Yeah, so for code, you can contact either by phone, 311, or there's an online complaint submission that I'll link. And if they haven't fixed your problem in a reasonable amount of time, follow up with them. Remember to get the inspector's name and get your case number. Because we have seen cases where the county, might close out a case without letting you know. So you just want to keep on that. And for things like, retaliation, you can contact the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs. I will link the email down below. Yeah. And you can also reach out to us if you need help with that. I think our email, someone posted it before, but just to remind you, it's info@rentersalliance.org, and we're happy to help walk you through that process.
And let me just clarify, the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs deals with lease violations or violations of your rights. So if you're not getting some services you're entitled to, if somebody's preventing you from forming a tenants association, by the way, we'd love to hear about that. Please contact us. And if you have a maintenance issue, including mice, vermin, mold issues, appliances not working, in all these cases, landlord, tenant, or code, of course, you must contact your property manager and landlord and give them an opportunity to fix the problem first. But if you find that they're not responsive, you can contact us. We'll give you some advice as to whether it's time to escalate this or not. But after you've given the landlord a fair opportunity to take care of the problem and you find that they have not been reasonable or responsive, then as Tim Wong, our outreach coordinator, says, or Emily Towie, our other outreach coordinator says, you can contact the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs or code. Just make sure you know the difference. Code is for maintenance and appliances and code violations. Landlord tenant is for violations of your rights or your lease. Brandy, you have your the hands raised.
Yeah, I just I wanted to make two comments, I think, related to all of this. One, I've noticed, and there are a couple of folks in the chat who are mentioning the struggles that they have dealing with these different agencies and programs. And I just wanted to, note that this is a key reason why we exist as the Renters Alliance, because these things are incredibly hard to navigate. We are often finding instances where, despite having regulations in place that should protect us, either we're not able to have those properly enforced, or people are struggling to really get in communication and to move the folks that they need to move. That's one of the reasons why we exist, is to help provide support for that, as well as you've heard throughout the course of this session, to help improve regulations where there are loopholes and cracks that we know that folks are falling through. So I just wanted to note, for a couple of folks who commented in the chat, definitely heard. This is very challenging. I've experienced those challenges. My family has experienced, members who rent in Montgomery County have experienced these challenges. And it's one of the reasons why I continue to be engaged in the Renters Alliance, because we need all of us working together to make these things work for us better, because right now there are a lot of ways that they don't work. I also just wanted to mention and appreciate, please keep coming back to these town halls. I learned today, and I've been renting here in Montgomery County for, I don't know, a while now, 9 years or so. And I learned that there's a tax credit that I can be applying for that I didn't know about, and that my family members can be applying for that we didn't know about. So there's a lot of these resources that, again, we work to try and make more available to people and make sure that people know about them, because we deal with this patchwork of stuff that you can only find if you can find it. And I really appreciate being part of this organization to help surface that more and more, and so that we can get more of what we need.
Thanks for that, Brandy. I think all of us have had these struggles. I got started with this because we can thank my landlord for trying to evict me for anything good that the Renters Alliance has done. The biggest mistake they ever made. David, would you walk us through a little bit about what the Access to Counsel and Evictions program is, how we work with tenants, and how that service might be available?
Sure. And I also just tack on to what Brandy mentions there, the patchwork. What earlier we're talking about the eviction prevention assistance, that there is one that when you're facing eviction imminently, like you're already in housing court, there's one other county program that it is actually available a little earlier when you're just behind in rent, and it actually can lead to multiple months of assistance instead of just a one-time assistance. It's called the Rental Assistance Program, or RAP for short. And if there's someone in the house who's over 55 or has a disability, then you can be referred to that program. And again, that's if that's even earlier, if you're not in housing court yet. Just wanted to add that on. But then, yeah, going back to if you are in housing court for failure to pay rent or tenant holding over, what have you, the Maryland State has a program and is now funded to provide free lawyers for low and moderate income tenants on the day of their hearing, and then also kind of more wraparound beforehand. And then so there in Montgomery County, there are 3 legal service providers that are participating. And again, you can see these folks down at the court, or we recommend reaching out to them as early as possible. We'll put the numbers in the chat. That's going to be, there's actually only 2 right now because one of them is not staffed up currently. So the 2 available are going to be Maryland Legal Aid Bureau. They now have a more robust housing attorney unit there. And then Casa de Maryland, in addition to the other services they offer, now have more housing attorneys on staff too. So again, they're there for what's called same-day representation. When tenants are down at the court, they'll make an announcement. But all the lawyers will tell you they can do a lot more if you can reach out ahead of time. And then there is still, even on the 2nd floor there of the court, there's a self-help center too, where you can consult with an attorney at the court that we recommend you visit.
David, also, if anybody needs an attorney because you're facing eviction, please contact us first. We'll help you to guide you there. We can also help distinguish between when you really need one and when there might be other resources available before you have to go and get an attorney. That's what we do. A lot of time, you can receive all types of intimidating communications that can be resolved before things escalate to that level. But also we know when it needs to be escalated to that level. And we work closely with Legal Aid, as David said, and the Homeless Persons Representation Project, and from time to time with CASA, which also has lawyers who deal with the Hispanic community and speak Spanish, although we speak Spanish too, although not me, I'll get you in trouble with my Spanish, but we have two people who speak fluent Spanish, and we have access to other languages as necessary. But please get in touch with us. And also, let me close out with a few important things. First of all, Pat, you have an important message. You're on mute. You're on mute. There you
As
go.
always, Renters Alliance want to remind everybody, vote when you can. It's important. Have your friends, your household, people in church, everyone needs to vote, and we need to get as much support as we can in the legislature to help renters. It's important votes.
We will be providing information about what legislators' positions are on renter issues. The Renters Alliance is a 501c3. We do not support any candidate or party, but we do inform the renter community about the positions that elected officials and candidates for office take. And you should know that when you go into the voting booth. And we do
Yes.
recommend that everybody vote, register to vote. We will down the road bring back our good friend Gilberto Zelaya, who's with the Elections Board, to give information on registering and how to vote and all the rest of it down the road. And we will also at some point bring in, when it comes to that time, candidates who are running for various offices to hear what they have to say about renter issues and renters' rights issues. So thank you for that, Pat. Our next town hall is on February 21st. I believe we're going to have Council Member Kate Stewart talking about a local bill that she has to require landlords to give proper notice about maintenance in the building, about fire safety plans, and other issues. So we'll definitely get into that as well. Are there any other questions or concerns in the chat that we need to address? Anybody? If not, then let me say one more thing about the rent stabilization regs so people understand. They are online in the county register, 22 pages worth. They will have to be reviewed. Comments can be made until the end of February. And then the final draft of these regulations will be sent to the council for review and a vote. So we already have some concerns. I wouldn't say criticisms yet, but concerns about the language. And if you're interested, it's going to be very important. Some of the things that are involved in the regulations have to do with the landlord's ability to petition the rent stabilization program to exempt that landlord from the rent cap. So are they on the troubled properties list? Can they pursue an exemption because they're putting money into repairs? It's a question. Are they not making enough money to be capped? They have to petition the county to do that, and there has to be a process for that. Likewise, we have to read the regulations more closely, but is there an opportunity for tenants to petition the county to oppose a landlord's request for exemption? So some of these things are very important to us in terms of how the program is going to work. Right now, the door is open for comment. So pay attention to this if you can and make your comments, and we can help leverage your opinions and concerns through our own contacts and collaboration with county officials and the county government. Okay, anything else? A reminder, if you're going to testify for rent stabilization, your testimony will have to be in on Friday. If you'd like to contact us so that we can help you with developing your testimony, please do so. Send us an email at info@rentersalliance.org. I want to thank our good friend, Delegate Janelle Wilkins, for her leadership on the rent stabilization bill. I want to thank our other friends, Delegate Lori Charkoudian, Delegate Bernice Miracu North, our good friend and board member who couldn't be with us tonight, Delegate Vaughn Stewart, and all the legislators in the House and Senate who are supporting tenants and trying to increase protections so that we can all live in stable, affordable, quality housing in the state of Maryland. And yes, Pat, putting that button just where it belongs. So with that, we'll say thank you to everybody and good night. And if you'd like one of those buttons, also you can send us a note at info@rentersalliance.org and we'll be happy to send you one. So with that, thank you to everybody and good night.